Entrepreneurship, got that inspiration. Yeah, now I'm just doing it. Working on these projects, my ideas I'm pursuing. No matter what the problem, the solution, I'm proving it. Let's talk about it and open up the dialogue. Contractors telling their stories about how they got it started and how they keep it going. The passion fuels the mission, now we blasting into orbit, we gone. That's where we grow from. Started with the vision, make the pitch and knock it out the park like home runs. We keep it moving, self-belief, no doubt. Pass off the mic to my man's Jim Cloud. I don't wanna stop for nothing.
Welcome to Contractor Stories. I am your host, Jim Cloud, and of course, our favorite contributor, it is Bob Mueller. Hey, Bob.
Hey, Jim. Great to be here.
Yeah, we're going to have a great guest today. We have in the green room Al Levy himself. Exciting.
Yes. This is going to be amazing. Al, for us contractors, Jim, you talk to a lot of contractors out there. You know a lot of us, but for us contractors, Al is that expert, that mentor, that one person that you need to have in your corner as a contractor, and he's definitely a legend. So for us to get him on the show today, us to get his story, I think this is going to be not only a big thing for our podcast, but just for the contractors out there that may not know Al Levy. I mean, it's hard to believe that people don't know who Al Levy is, but there may be somebody that just doesn't know how much this guy has contributed to the contractor world, but also his story. I'm excited to hear about it.
I am too. I've known Al for some time. Al and I actually come from the same place. I won't say where it is, but it is on the East Coast. And you can probably tell by actually just listening to Al talk. For those of you who aren't familiar with our program, Bob and I host a weekly show called Contractors Stories. And all we do is interview contractors and ask them their stories. And some of these are amazing, aren't they, Bob?
Yeah, 100%. There's a lot of really good shows out there that's going to teach you how to maybe go from 500,000 to $1 million or $1 million to 5 million. There's a lot of books out there that's going to teach guys the contracting side of the thing. We are here just to kind of like encourage the contractors out there that hey, even these guys, these legends like Al, they all started somewhere. They all had just a story to start with. You might not know that Al is, help contractors go from, 1 million to a 30 million, 40 million dollar type contractor. He's helped these type of people do that, which means he's been very successful in his own stuff. But we're not here to talk about the success of his stuff. We're just here to tell you that all these guys started from some place. They all have a really good story to tell, and we love to have these type of guys on our show to do that.
Bob, are you ready to get Al's story?
Yeah, I'm totally ready. Let's do this.
I am too. On Contractor Stories, I get super excited when I can interview people who have meant so much to me and meant so much to all of you. Al Levy is here as our guest today on Contractor Story. Al, how are you, bud?
I am doing great. I am enjoying a beautiful day here in Arizona. I think it's going to be under 150.
Yeah, summertime in Arizona, very, very hot. It's apparently the hottest year on record in the entire world, they say. So hope you're enjoying the heat. And
yeah, I'm going to go to Houston to cool off.
Yeah, that'll really help. The only difference is we just have the shower you get with it. So when you walk outside, it's 110, but you also get a little moisture.
Very nice.
Well, I think that Al can probably handle the heat over there. He's probably still got a successful hold on the HVAC industry over there, I would imagine.
Oh, I'm well connected and plugged in, as you would think, Bob. And also I bought a house with 2 separate systems. And sure enough, one night it went down, so I shifted to the other side of the house.
Oh, no.
So, yeah.
So Al,
I practice what I preach, Bob.
I can see that.
So Al, thanks so much for coming onto the program and exposing yourself, because that's what we do. We do an expose on our guests. We do a feature, and we're going to go back and by the way, everybody, Al has not been privy to the questions that I'm going to ask him.
That is true.
But Al is sharp, and Al's got a great story. He's got a great history. And I'm going to start back, not at the beginning, but pretty far back. I want to go back to about 6th grade. Okay. Can you remember that?
Yeah, I do remember 6th grade, but actually my story does have to go back a little bit more because we talk about what forms us, if you will.
Well, fine. Then let's go back to what you first remember, what first formed you that you want to tell your story about.
So, things happen to us. Who comes to a certain point in life where you haven't had the scars and bumps along the way? And I got the big jolt when I was very young. My mom passed away when I was only 4 years old. Mm-hmm. And so the blessing, of course, was my dad was exceptional. He was growing a business and he was well on the way to growing a family. He came back from World War II and he and my mom got very busy cranking out kids. And so myself, my 2 older brothers and my sister, fortunately, we became the Brady Bunch before we knew what Brady Bunch was, because I grew up with my stepbrother and stepsister because they had lost their dad. So we combined into a family and grew up together in a big, crazy, wild house. And so that really did change a lot of things for me, obviously, but I wasn't like knowing what the change was. The one thing I will say to you guys is that, and to those who are listening, is we never had like a family meeting, but we all knew this same unspoken message. If you want to do something in life, get to it. Because mom passed away when she was 39. What I didn't know is that she had been sick for at least a year or two. And my mom was a nurse. So you think they'd be on the front line, but this is ancient history. So that really kind of, chaos, if you will. There's many reasons why my tagline is my second business was less stress and more success. I was born into stress and chaos. And that kind of informed the way I grew up. So it is my earliest forming memory.
That's an incredible way to start off the story, your story. And actually, I did not know that. I knew you were in a family business, but I have heard you over the years talk about your father and brothers and so forth, but I did not know that. And that will really change someone. Anything like that, when you're so young, will change who you are at that stage, and then it sets the tone for the rest of your life.
It does. I think it was the Jesuits, they talk about if we have your kids from age 0 to 7, we own them for the rest of their life because we just repeat the same patterns. And I don't see myself as a victim. My dad didn't let us feel victims. Circumstances happen, but we were very clear is we had one great parent and I had a really great stepmom who really educated me in a lot of ways. She was a high school teacher, and fortunate for me because I'm dyslexic. I was struggling through school. And what I love to share here, because we are pulling the curtain back about Al, is that people think I was organized and on top of things. No, I was a mess. I was a mess. And my stepmom comes to me in high school and she says to me, "You cannot go to college this way." She had to organize my study habits. She had to create time that I would block out. And she would watch me work. And she realized I would start with something tough, get frustrated, and I was done. So she reorganized to start with something easy and continue to build up confidence and work. And by the way, of course, I carried that on to business and everything else in my life about either get out in front of it or be prepared to get run over by it. And that is a recurring theme in my life, is that when I could recognize the trouble ahead, I now needed to make mid-course correction and change me. Because I was very busy blaming everybody else. I don't know who is young, who doesn't remember that it was never your fault. Mm-hmm. It was what happened to you. It was your big brother, your big sister, your friends. They corrupted you. We're all full of excuses. And, people had it a lot tougher than me. I didn't have to worry about food on the table and a roof over my head. I never forget that. But I was blessed, and I mean blessed, by having a dad that not only was growing business, but the way that we had family bonding is he would be running a service call at night. He'd gather his boys up into the truck and off to the call we went. And so the business kind of became the family structure, if you will.
Mhm.
But that was our time to not just talk about business, but to talk about life. And my father was the biggest first mentor and biggest first coach in my entire life. I was lucky again. I have had nothing but great mentors come into my life. Now, I'm sure I sent out the beacon and said, come along, because I'm ready. What do you got? Because I was lucky, just blessed with so many.
Al, what timeline that for us and timestamp that? What year was that, and what demographic and what area were you in at that time?
Well, you're talking about by the time I went to high school and then off to college. Now, my college experience, before you all think, oh yeah, he never had to work. I worked at the business by the time I was 8. You know, we were emptying garbage cans and sweeping up and riding as a helper and, you know, learning fittings and learning how to, you know, clean fittings. We got a full education, and we actually could drive trucks before we could ever drive a car. We knew how to, you know, stick shift, and that was just, it was fun going to work. It was fun. That's all I can say. So that was probably in our formative years. And again, my 2 older brothers were with me. And then I went off to college. And when I would go off to college, I was 6 months a year, I was working in the business. So I had a very long, not just the 26 years of when I finally came into the business full time. So that kind of is the timestamp of things. When I got to the business, though, Bob, it was already had been formed by my grandfathers in a gas station in 1936 by my dad and my uncle, who went off to World War II in 2 different areas. And also my mom served in World War II as well as my aunts and the rest of it. And when they all got back, that's when we got into what was fuel oil heating. And for those who don't know what fuel oil heating is, think propane. That was the business. There was no organizing structure. What was good is that my dad and my uncle were really liked in the community. They knew that they did great work. My father was a great, you know, sales, marketing, all that stuff. And my uncle was great at all the other side. And there was no org charts like you have. There were no manuals or any of that. My father's advice to us is hurry up and do something and don't sit in this office. That's what he shared with us. And so we just went out and we did what people nowadays know not to do, which is work really hard and hope the money shows up. And here's the good news. More times than not, the money showed up. Did we know how? Could we repeat it all the time? No. So there were these times, Bob, where the accounting team would come in, you know, about a month before the end of the year, would say something to this effect. Oh, we got way more money in the business. Go out and buy some tools and trucks and stuff like that, and you can pay yourself a bonus. And that was a very nice thing. But then again, there were years when they would come into the office and go, the numbers do not look good. So I hope all of you have money set aside because you're not getting paid for 2 months. So yes, we were blindsided. This was my thing. And talk about mentors coming into my life. The one that most people do know is Ellen Rohr. We met in the 90s when she was very young. Just in case she's listening, when she was very young, we were both members of C2000, which is the founding Nexstar. And I didn't even know how to spell a budget, let alone do budget. And we didn't realize all these things. You know, it's nowadays it's more common knowledge, but it wasn't. So that was one of these things that we had to learn. And as I was growing up through the business, my father was very clear. You're going to start at the bottom and you're going to do everything because you can never ask anyone else to do anything. Can I share a quick, we are talking about house stories. When I was very young, probably in maybe about 2nd or 3rd grade, Jim.
Yeah.
I come home and I tell my dad, my friends and I were laughing today because one of the kids in the class, when they spoke about what their dad does, he sells rags. And we thought that was so funny. And my father goes, you think you know everything, don't you? He goes, I know who you're speaking about. His dad drives a Cadillac and your dad does not. He goes, plus, you don't ever get to judge anybody for the work that they do. he's not, my father was very soft-spoken, unlike his sons. And he wasn't, but this was so foundational for me. You know, kind of like the other great advice he gave me along the way, because coming in the business after a while, Bob, as a young guy in your early 20s, you think you know it all, right? And you're espousing about how great you are. And my father is in this office that's really about the size of what you're seeing here. Me, my dad, and my two brothers. As you remember the mantra, we don't make any money with you sitting here. So we're in this office and I'm bragging about something. And my dad just goes, you know, when you really are that good, you won't have to brag about yourself. Everyone else will be bragging about you.
That is so true.
Yes, he was a very, very wise man. Never went to business school, but you know, he just learned it.
Yep.
And
So
this
Al,
was it. I'm sorry, Jim. Go ahead.
Al, this is a tough question, but it's a fair question. And I say it's tough because it can be uncomfortable. And you haven't prepared for this, I understand. What is the single most biggest mistake you have made in your life?
I think if I could go back in that famous time machine, I was too busy blaming everyone and everyone else, anything other than me, because I couldn't take any more guilt on me. I didn't know, I wasn't intellectually or emotionally intelligent enough to understand that. And it was in training one time that I went to, management training, that said, stick your arms out as far as you can from your body. It goes, everything you control is inside as far as you can stretch your arms. And everything in the world is outside of your arms that you cannot control. Here's the good news. Everything on the inside of as far as your arm, that's the only thing that's important. And so it was a total mind change shift. And there were many occasions to this. One of the really great occasions, as I said, there were a lot of mentors that came into my life. Not all my mentors were my age or older. Many were younger than me. And so we're bouncing along on a bus in a Nexstar event back in the 90s. And I'm fortunate because Jack Tester, who was the original head of Nexstar, is on that bus. And I started talking to him. And I said, Jack, you know, you see companies all across the country. And at that time, Nexstar was 140 members, which was pretty astounding. And now, of course, they're huge. And I said, you see little companies, big companies, what makes the difference? And without hesitation, he looks me in the eye and he goes, it's the owner. And I go, well, you know, I'm a New York City union shop and I have very tough staff and New York City regulations and and he just puts his hand up in my face and goes, stop. It is always the owner. I have guys that are in huge markets losing their shirt every day they're in business. And I have guys in towns of 10,000 who are just making monstrous amounts of money and they are beloved by their community. It's the owner's two abilities, which is to inspire and implement, not one or the other. I said, well, what's an illustration of that? He goes, so there's these guys who can do like fire you up with great speeches. We're going to be the best and we're going to do everything and we're going to dominate the market. And you're going to have a great career. And then they send you out to a white truck with a flat tire and a cracked windshield. How long are you going to be inspired? And then he goes, implementing is the other part of it. So they have all the great software, all the great technology. They have marketing figured out, all this great stuff. But nobody believes in the ownership. No one feels that the ownership is trustworthy, that is looking out for them and the customers. So no one is buying it. So he just pauses and looks at me and he goes, it's the owner's ability to inspire and implement. And when I went home from that meeting, I finally wore it. I mean, I finally wore it. And what I mean by that is I said, okay, I'm going to list these problems that I've seen as out of my control. And I'm going to knock them off one at a time, but I need partners. And the partners I was speaking to was my two older brothers and my dad. So you as owners at home, if you're listening and you're the only owner, you got a much easier path because I had to convince 2 older brothers and a dad that they should come on this journey with me. And so I needed to enlist allies. And one of the allies is the great Dan Holohan, who is also a friend, mutual friend of myself and Ellen. And he is was an industry writer, very big influence. My dad thought of Dan Holohan as his son. They had a great relationship. So I would say to Dan what I need, and Dan goes, I got you. He would take Urban out to lunch, work on him enough so that it kind of sounded like an idea. So soften him up, if you will. And then I would come in and go, hey, you know, I've been thinking about, we should do this. And he goes, yeah, I think that's a good idea. Let's put that in motion. So it's much easier if you grease the wheels, as they say, or, you know, the axles or whatever analogy that you want, but you've got to get some partnership and buy-in to help you. One of the stories that I've shared 1,000 times, so this will be 1,001. As I mentioned, my life was in chaos and I was a young man, and we would go on vacation, my wife and I, and early in the cell phone era, my phone would be ringing the whole time I was away, the whole time. And Bob is shaking his head because he knows exactly what I mean. Am I right, Bob?
Oh gosh, I remember the first time I had an opportunity to even take my kids to Disneyland. They were like, I would say 2 and 4. And it was the first time I was excited. I was able to finally get away, took the kids to Disneyland. And because I was just, you know, a one operator guy, had a couple, you know, apprentices. I didn't have your systems and policies and procedures that I do today in my company. Then it was me on the phone and handling it, right, and delegating. And there was a little delegation because I was the only one that knew everything. And of course, so all the phone calls came to me, to your point.
Yes. Yeah. So I just said to my wife, I go, I need 2 years. I need 2 years to change this. What I'm going to do is take young, willing apprentices with no skills to willing techs with great skills so that they are fully empowered. And I'm going to build a career around them. And so I'm going to build the systems, the manuals, the training center, and all this other stuff. To this day, I have no idea why I said 2 years. So I don't know if you believe in divine intervention or spirituality or whatever you believe, or maybe I was just high. Although I did inhale, but I don't think I ever told whatever Bill said.
I think you got it backwards, but whatever.
I got it backwards, right? Yes, I have it backwards. So I gave it away. The point of it is that literally 2 years later, Natalie and I had gone away on vacation. At the end of the vacation, I turned to her. I go, "Did you notice something different?" And she thinks for a minute. She goes, "Your phone wasn't ringing." I go, "Yeah, that's exactly it." And so, yeah, when I talk about any of this, it goes back to you talking about where did you come from and what informed you. Early on, my dad's telling me, don't ever do anything, ask anyone to do anything that you have not done yourself. And so guys like Bob and all these years of the 21 years of doing this, both one-to-one in consulting across, you know, United States, Canada, and now today it's really the world, Australia, New Zealand, UK. These systems are not testing you because they've already been tested. They're testing you to put your ego aside. Because Bob and I will tell you, some of it we kind of liked, even though we kind of hated it. And so, remember I said about the mentors coming into your life and busting you, is what I would say. So Dan Holohan, I was lucky enough to have this giant in the industry willing to ride with me shotgun when we go out to these trouble calls. That was not happening for anyone. And so we get done with a call and my phone is ringing, the 2A radio is asking for me, and the beeper on my hip is going off. And Dan, who's in the side ticket, he was great at holding up the truth mirror, which I loved and hated. And he looks over at me and he goes, "You think that's normal, don't you?" And so, Bob, in the first moment, I said to myself, I hate them. I hate them all for doing this to me. Look what they're happening to me, and I really hate them. And then I stopped for a second and I said, I'm pretty indispensable. And then we talked about it, me and Dan. What I was going through was I was attached to being the rescuer. Mm-hmm. So if you grew up cowboys and Indians and, you're watching the shows, I loved to ride to the rescue. I was a rescuer. And I loved to be the guru. All of these techs and all of these people out there, including the people in the office, they're okay, but they still need the guru. They still need me, because this was attached to me being indispensable, which, believe it or not, goes back to when I was a kid. I knew early on, nobody coached me, that my path in life was to be indispensable. And until I was ready to give it up, nothing was going to happen. And the last one is, in New York in particular, but I imagine it's everywhere, everyone as a kid wants to grow up to be a cop or a fireman. So I wanted to be a fireman. I liked putting the fires out. Here's the insidious thing. If there were no fires, I would intentionally set them.
One. Yeah.
Yes.
I figured. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is the point about your personality. More than what you think, well, that's just what goes on in business. Yeah, it does. But you got to go again. Who's causing it? And I have my arms out in front of me, because it was me. It was me.
Al, what was your biggest win in your life? It doesn't have to be professional. It could be personal. But if you had to answer with just one answer, the biggest win, was it your family, your business, helping others? But you can only choose one. What's the biggest?
I'm going to bypass my family, although I have a huge family and I love them, but that's pretty trite. I will tell you that if I'm allowed to step into my ego, I left my business. And Jim, I know your story. You left the golden handcuffs. Mm-hmm. I left the golden handcuffs when I left my business. I stepped into nothingness. I was, Ellen used to tease me that I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I go, it's true. I had a silver spoon, but mine was covered with fuel oil.
Oh.
But yeah, it was not a pleasant experience. Like, you don't have to do anything. You were on a roof freezing your butt off in the dead of winter, fixing a heating system. So if that's the silver spoon, I'm looking for a golden spoon. Anyway, I went off into this, to nothingness, and created a business and trusted myself, really probably for the first time, Jim. Mm-hmm. Really had to dig deep and trust myself. Because when I left, I was 48. And even though I told my brothers and my dad, because I was never going to leave them short, at 45, I gave that famous 3 years notice. So Bob will appreciate that, Bob. If we get 2 weeks notice from somebody, that's pretty good. A week. Years ago, they used to leave the keys on the truck, and we go, are they coming back? Are they gone? And then sometimes we'd have to find the truck before they had GPS tracking. So I gave 3 years notice, but I didn't spend any time working on what my business was going to be. And actually, again, the famous Dan Holohan, after I'm off and gone to my own, and I'm 6 months into my new business. This is June of 2002. And he goes, you're like a guy who's warming up in the bullpen, but you never come in and pitch, because I wasn't going out to do anything. And I said, I am working on stuff right now that I'm taking from the business and making even better. Now, when I come out of the pen, I'm going to be unstoppable for the next 20 years. And again, sometimes you have to speak it into even before you really know it and believe it. Until it comes out of your mouth, it really isn't real. At least for me, it's not real. Bob, I don't know. Have you had that same experience?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I took the road of hard knocks along the way. And as you know, Al, I didn't implement a lot of what you've been teaching into my own systems and processes for a very long time. I was that guy stuck in his own ways, doing things the hard way for 20 plus years. I didn't get out of the way of my own self. And to your point, it took a long time for me to really build the systems and processes, and then reach out and get your help and start doing these things. And for me, yes, it took that vision. It took that it took that, for me, I had to, get the mentors into my life. I had to get the people into my life and then get these things implemented in and get things built. But you're right, it takes vision for sure.
It does. I think you just have to speak it to Jim. I know a little bit about your story as you shared. You stepped out into nothingness, and that's really, most of us do it because we don't like where we are.
Yep.
And that's true. But there's only two ways that we really make a profound change, in my opinion. Either the pain is so bad that we finally say, okay, we're against the wall, we're coming out swinging, and we're going to change and do what it takes. Or the few of us that are lucky is the gain is so big on the other side of this river, I'm going to fight my way across this current and I'm going to end up there. And I've coached so many people on this analogy when we were doing work together, because the work could be, when I was doing one-to-one, it could be 2 years, 3 years of work. Now they got better with each program. Don't get me wrong, but they, as owners, we want to know, how far are we from the goal line? When can we go down and spike the ball, if you will? And the answer, of course, is you can never do that. But when do I get to the other side of the river? And I remind them, you started where you didn't want to be. And you knew on the other side of the river is where you want to be. And you said you're going to swim across the current. Now you're halfway through, and it's exhausting. It's going to take as much effort to go back to where you felt comfortable and hated as it is to keep going to where you really want to be. And so that is also another thing for my youth. I realized pretty early, because I was dyslexic and confused and disorganized and all the other things, I was still a good student. Why was that? It was because of sheer will. I was not going to fail. So I'd love to tell you that I was brilliantly intelligent and it all came easy. It did not. It did not. I was fortunate, again, a lot of great people and coaching and all that other stuff. But it was really, this thought came into my head, and okay, it's going to sound funny. I was age 10. And what I said to myself is, yeah, there's more talented people out there than I will ever be. But when they quit, I will still be working. And when I got to really working as an adult, and I would be out at 2 a.m. and friends and people were in bed sleeping while I was out doing calls, I said to myself, they may be more talented, but I'm out here working, getting it done.
Yeah. Great stories. This has been awesome. The time has been flying. We're not quite done yet. I've got one question I like to ask everybody who comes on to Contractors Stories. And I know how much you love yourself, Al, so you have to be careful when you answer this question.
I'm hugging myself for those who are listening.
Yeah, yeah. For the contractors out there who are young in their business, maybe they're a little mature in their business, what's the number one book you would recommend to a home service professional?
Again, you're making it a tough choice, but so I'm going to go with my one book. And it's very funny to me in that it's got a new life. It is The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. There's a lot of different versions of it. So that was a book that two mentors, you've heard the name already, Ellen Rohr and Dan Holohan, told me in the early 90s, you must read this book because you are going to be in an early grave. I've shared a number of times, and especially I think with you, Jim, is I was 246 pounds at a point in my life. I am 192 today. And I lost the weight, gained the weight, did all the things. Look, we all have our addictions. Everyone has their addictions. That was my addiction. I was eating my stress. And so what they told me was, you need to read this book because the way you're going about business is all wrong. And you're going to run out of time and it's going to be an issue. So I did read Michael Gerber's E-Myth, and it told me why things didn't work. And it told me what was broken. It didn't give me help in the how, but I'm really good at how. And I once again enlisted my brothers and my dad. And I went to them and said, I read this book. You guys need to read it. But this is our path to take control. Because right now, we just throw great people at an oncoming bus trying to slow it down.
It's awful. It's awful.
It's awful, but it's very true.
Yes, it is.
So I said, so why don't we stop throwing great people into no systems or broken systems, and let's create great systems that take good people to great. And to their credit, they listened to the youngest in this crew and said, yes, let's do it. And by the way, what does that mean? It was $150,000 in today's money to hire Dan to write it, to run the meetings with me, because I had tried for years. And it just came out as like a law book, Article 1-. It was useless. And it really wasn't how we did our work. It was just, well, don't do this, don't do that. And so Dan, and it's a fraction of what Bob already has in the program, and even the lessons, Bob, I didn't know. That was all that I had to know. So that book is the seminal book that changed the course and arc, as I like to say, of both my business and my life. And the grace, I'm going to get a little choked up. The great part of this is it's helped so many other contractors like Bob and others finally get control of their business and get their business to be working for them rather than them working for their business.
Yeah, incredible. I can say that, you've been instrumental in helping me in my business. I know that you've helped thousands and thousands of other contractors. And yes, that's a great book. I will put a plug in for you and say that, you're a machine. The things that you've done to help this industry has been instrumental to contractors like myself. You continue to help our contractors out. You give your time generously to our industry. You do so much for everybody. I do want to, just thank you for everything that you've done for this industry. You're a legend in our industry. We love having you here today. We couldn't appreciate you more than for your time that you generously give to us on our podcast today. But I'm sure there's some big things that you're still doing out there. And I know that Jim wants to give you some time to plug your stuff, and Jim, take it from there.
Well, quickly here, we've talked about Al and his past. He can really help all of you who are consuming this today, contractors, the 7-Power Contractor. I'm going to have all of Al's information in the notes of this podcast. But before we conclude, Al, quickly talk about the 7 powers real fast.
So it's planning power, operating power, staffing power, sales coaching power, marketing power, financial power. 7. So those are the 7 things that you'll work on for the rest of your life. So act now and buy the book. It's a book, it's an ebook, it's on Audible. Honestly, I didn't write it for the money. I wrote it really to be read in 2 to 4 hours because I'm not a fast reader myself. And the writer, Alina, who you guys know, worked with me to make sure that it came out the way I wanted it. You're going to read it over and over again. And it's not for my ego I say that, it's because there's so much information that's been picked up along the way. And Bob, I appreciate your words, but when you say that, I immediately feel that I have been given a gift by the mentors I speak to. And the only way I can give that gift back is to give to others. Now, yeah, I get paid for it, but you're not changing my life. Nobody's putting my kids through college or anything else of that nature. And my father had a million great sayings, which you don't have enough time. But one day he said to me, he goes, Al, sometimes what you get for nothing isn't worth what you paid for it.
So true.
Al Levy,
true.
Thank you so much. Like I said,
do have a quick plug. I got a quick plug. If you love what you heard, come see me in person on the stage.
Oh, yeah.
At the Freedom event, November. I think it's first
through third.
Yep, 1st to 3rd in Orlando. So, yeah, Jim will point you out in that direction. I would love to come meet you guys. It's always great to see old friends, your clients and contractors and everything else of that nature, and make new ones.
And Al, I'm doing you a big favor. I am not going to be competing with you this time on stage. So I'm going to let you have everybody.
Thank you so much. Jim, you're just a generous man.
I am here for you, buddy. Al Levy, thank you so much for joining us today on Contractors Stories. Really appreciate it.
Really appreciate it.
Entrepreneurship, got that inspiration. Yeah, now I'm just doing it. Working on these projects, my ideas I'm pursuing. No matter what the problem, the solution I'm proving it. Let's talk about it and open up the dialogue.